Well, hello and welcome to episode 430 of the Plain Talking UK podcast. I'm Nev, sitting in for Carlos this week, and hope everyone's had a great week. In this week's show, we've got more changes at ITA Airways in Italy, new union agreements at Ryanair, and an A320neo lands with only 200 kilograms of fuel in its tanks. That might mean tea with no biscuits with the chief pilot. In the military, an F-35 crashes near Hill Air Force Base in Utah. The pilot is safe, we're pleased to report. And we discuss former UK military pilots training China's Air Force. And we have a military list of affordable warbirds. So, joining me on the show tonight in the Plain Talking UK Master Suite studio, as always, is Matt.
A very good evening. How are you? You?
Very good, thank you.
Lovely.
Yes.
What have you been up to this week? Anything exciting?
I've been, glued to my desk this week because I've been on the road for 3 weeks. So there's a bit of a backlog of
paperwork. Yes.
Paperwork and things for me to do for work. So, but apart from that, I took Thursday off and went down to White Waltham Aerodrome, not far from me. Did a interview which we'll tell you about, which Nick very kindly did for us as well. That's going to be another 3-part series coming up in a couple of months' time.
Oh wow.
Which was very good indeed. Had a great time down there. Met some people I knew actually down there as well, so that was good. And we'll talk about that a bit later on. So, but how's your week been, Matt? What have you been up to?
Yeah, not too bad. Sort of like trying to sort of rev myself back up into sort of out of holiday mode into the real world again. That's been quite challenging. Yes, my work productivity is perhaps not what it should have been Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But sort of settling back into it all now. It's been a sort of a mixed bag work-wise, but all good.
Yeah, nice. Excellent stuff. Joining us over the pond, as always, is the chap with a slight cold at the moment, I believe. So it's Armando.
Yeah, hi guys. Sorry if I sound like a mix between Clint Eastwood and Marge Simpson.
Oh,
it's been a week.
That's quite a thing.
That's quite the mix, isn't
it? Yeah. Picture that.
Yes.
No, I'm happy to be back. I guess last week, or was it on the show? We took the family and some friends camping up in the wilds of eastern Tennessee, which was actually beautiful. And this week, Megan and I are over in Colorado Springs. I'm officiating a retirement ceremony this evening. And then I'm in Denver next week for training recurrent in the Pilatus. And that's a week-long thing. So it's been pretty busy here too.
How has that come round again already? It only seems 5 minutes ago that you were doing this.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And, special guest on the show this week from somewhere close to Gatwick Airport in a hotel is, I'll call him A320 Andy because that's how we know him. So, evening, Andy. How's it going with you?
Good evening. I feel like Captain Jeff. You're joining me live from Studio 21635 in the London Gatwick Hilton Hotel.
Yeah, there we are.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Very good. I have an enforced 3 days in a hotel here where I'm not really doing very much.
Oh, how does that?
That's all right.
I mean, that sounds all right to me, but
yeah. And this week I haven't really done a lot. And next week I'm going on holiday. So yeah, I'm living my best life.
Oh, gosh.
Anywhere nice.
Yeah.
Off to Cyprus.
Oh, lovely.
Ooh.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
but unfortunately for all the listeners, I'm back again. But thanks for having me.
Well, there's some nice stories to talk about tonight,
Some really good ones.
which we thought you might be able to contribute to. So, so we thought we would ask you on. So, really appreciate you coming on, Andy. Thanks ever so much indeed.
Pleasure as always.
And we've got to say thank you to everyone in the chat room as well that's joining us tonight. I can see in there's Mazuz, Arne Carlson. Richard Adams was in there briefly, but he's going to join us or listen to the recording tomorrow because he's unavailable later on tonight. Matt C. Dirk S. is in there. Hobby Time. Main Man Micah, Jenny Parkinson, John Jester. Hello, John. Hope you are well. Masha's in there as well. And so is Pilot Pip also.
My goodness me, it's the lesser spotted Pilot Pip.
Yes, about time we had a new podcast from you, young man. I noticed there's some people kicking off about that the other day, saying, when you're going to do another one. So perhaps you'll tell us when that's going to be.
Lovely.
But,
Sounds like a plan.
looking forward to the next one. I actually, on a serious note, I do like Pip's stuff that he does with Al. Really entertaining. But obviously, they're both very busy flying, so it's difficult to get them.
Very informative as well, to be fair.
It is, very much so.
Absolutely.
Well, don't forget, you can tune into us on various platforms. You can find us on YouTube at Plain Talking UK, and hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. You'll be notified when we're live and recording new episodes, and we'd love to have you in the chat room as always. So I think that's all the housekeeping out of the way. So let's start the commercial segment. Off we go, Matt.
Captain has turned on the seatbelt light. Please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
Well, this first one is from simpleflying.com, and it says that ITA Airways Board of Directors revokes all power from Executive President Alfredo Altavilla. So Italian flag carrier has confirmed that all powers have been revoked from the airline's executive president, and the motion was first ordered last week and was approved in a meeting of the board of directors on October the 20th. ITA Airways confirmed the move in a statement released, saying the board of directors of ITA Airways held today fully confirmed the revocation of all of the powers of the executive president Alfredo Altavilla, which was already ordered by a resolution on October the 12th, and the attribution of those powers to the Chief Executive Officer Fabio Maria Lanzarini. This means that all power now sits with ITA, the ITA Airways Lazzarini, leaving him in charge of negotiations over the ongoing sale of the airline. Exclusivity over the next stage of the negotiations was given to a consortium involving New York investment group Centaris, Air France KLM and Delta Airlines. However, the takeover talks have since stalled, and at the end of to the end of the last month, the Italian government has extended the deadline to the end of this month, which is October the 31st. Whilst the reason for the removal of the executive president's powers has not been confirmed, sources suggest that it is linked to the potential takeover bid. According to the Italian newspaper Il Messaggero, the majority of the airline's board of directors blamed Altavilla for slowing negotiations with Centaris. Despite the current instability, ITA Airways went on to reiterate its commitment to successfully running the airline, adding that the board of directors reiterated that the company's main task is to remain focused on the industrial plan, continuing along the road taken that it's providing better results than expected, with the aim of consolidating the relaunch of ITA Airways and protecting the company's workers who have taken the challenge. In spite of the ongoing takeover talks, ITA Airways has a lot to look forward to over the coming months. Last week, the airline announced 3 new intercontinental routes from its hub at Rome Fiumicino Airport, Tokyo, Haneda, Delhi and Male, which will be operated by its current long-haul fleet of Airbus A330-200s and A350-900 aircraft. Well, this airline just, I don't know what to say about it. And there's always something happening, isn't there? From the days of Alitalia to all the government intervention to what's going on here. It's just a continuing thing, isn't it? So I'm sure that they would quite like to get back to what I would call entirely normal operations, but that seems some way off.
Is that possible, though? I mean, seriously. I mean, essentially, sort of reading between the lines, it almost sounds like it's basically a bust airline, isn't it? I mean,
no, it's
no?
Well, I think that they see back in a long time ago. I mean, Alitalia was a pretty decent airline actually, right, when it was part of the Star Alliance group and all the rest of it. But so much has happened since then with government interventions and all sorts of other things going on with crewing and I think union difficulty as well. So it's a never-ending story. And Jenny in the chat room says,
don't ask.
Don't ask. So
yeah. I do sound like that. I mean, thoughts, Andy, on this situation?
Well, it's just Alitalia Mark 20 or whatever it is now. It's the same airline just being passed around, renamed, refinanced, and now that's trying to be sold off. Obviously, the board and the government aren't happy with the man who's trying to sell it off, so they've replaced him. I think that's it, really, isn't it?
That's in a nutshell, yes.
Yeah, and it's a sorry state. I know various airlines in Europe were looking at one point to purchase them, but that hasn't happened. So who knows what their future will be? They'll be here. They're like we're not going to say that. They'll be around. They'll be around forever because Alitalia won't go away.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess is there perhaps I'm speaking out of turn here. Is there perhaps a chance? Perhaps there's this it's almost like a national pride now. I mean, it's been going on that long now that it's sort of like almost at all costs it mustn't fail.
Well, yeah. And who else do they have really to call it a flag carrier? I mean, we've got BA, but that's not a flag carrier really. They're owned by the Spanish.
Andrew, please.
Oh, sorry. Shall I pull the blade out?
Oh, dear.
I won't twist it.
Oh, my back's really hurting right now.
And who else operates in Italy? EasyJet, Meridiana are gone now.
Ryanair.
Ryanair.
Yeah.
So I think it is a bit of national pride as well. They want to keep this airline going.
Yeah. I mean, what Armando, from your sort of side of the water, I mean, any views on this?
Unfortunately, no. I just don't know enough about the history of Alitalia and ITA. Is ITA? ITA? I see their airplanes, but we'll talk a little bit about government intervention a little bit later when we talk about the Boeing Max.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Really? That sounds terrifying.
Well, moving on to the next story, and it's Matt's turn to talk about Ryanair, of course, because it's the second story.
Of course.
And some agreement for a change with the union.
It's almost unbelievable, isn't it? It's Sky News, news.sky.com is where this story comes from. And the headline is Ryanair and Unite sign cabin crew pay agreement. Ryanair has reached an agreement with cabin crew over pay and working conditions, which means they will work 5 days on and have 3 days off. The budget airline said on Thursday that it had signed a deal with Unite, the union representing cabin crew based in the UK, for upfront and annual pay increases. Ryanair described it as bringing a significant restructuring of pay meant to deliver more guaranteed earnings and other pay and benefit improvements. Crew will now have competitive starting pay and will work a fixed 5 days on, 3 days off. A core feature of this new agreement, Ryanair said it's a clear path helping crew to rapidly secure promotions to senior advisory and training roles. Unite's national officer, Oliver Richardson, said that we can confirm, based on Unite proposals, that we have reached an agreement in relation to pay. We are continuing discussions on improving further terms and conditions in order to ensure our members equally share in the recovery of the airline post-COVID. Similar agreements have been worked on by Ryanair and its crew across Europe, as after they went on strike in France and Spain in the summer. French air traffic controllers and airport staff also went on strike, as did Ryanair and Vueling cabin crew in Italy, but strikes by fuel workers and check-in staff in the UK were avoided. Many British trade unions are preparing for strike action as the rising cost of living delivers an effective pay cut. Ryanair has announced it is to grow beyond its COVID-19 staff numbers and creates more than 2,500 jobs to carry 225 million passengers by 2026. I mean, it's good news, I suppose. It's difficult, isn't it? Because I completely understand why people are striking. I do get that, but also in a difficult time, I suppose there is that concern, if you like, almost for are we far enough the other side of COVID for this to be a safe thing for airlines to have to sort of, because there's a lot of recovery still going on, isn't there?
Yeah. There is, yeah, and I think Ryanair have had an interesting relationship with the unions over the years, but this is, clearly this is a move forward, which is good stuff. But as you say about the COVID thing, well, there's still some quite difficult times in Germany and other parts of Europe as well at the moment. So it is not all over, and there's talk on the news today about the rate increasing. Well, it would increase, wouldn't it? Because it's autumn, and that's one of those things. But certainly Ryanair have got their foot hard down at the moment in terms of the growth part of it. That's sure.
And I think there is this, and I think I've mentioned it before, of course, but they were one of the few airlines who didn't lay off a lot of their staff in the whole sort of COVID thing, haven't they? They chose to furlough them instead where they could, and maybe that's you're not sort of seeing the disruption perhaps with that airline as you are with some other low cost airlines.
They've made a lot of money this year. Exactly because of that. They kept the staff, they retained their staff, and this is only good news for everybody if you ask me. Ryanair have now got their fixed cost bit. They know what their costs are because they've got the agreement for however many years it is. The cabin crew are happier because in airlines now, especially low cost, we're seeing a deluge of leavers. They're just all going because they're realising they can get better jobs elsewhere for better money. Cabin crew, especially again low cost airlines, they're not treated the best, unfortunately. So I think it's good. It's always good when you can avoid some form of strike action, and that comes from a proper hard lefty here. So yeah,
absolutely.
I agree. Any kind of stability. When I lived over there, I had a good friend that was a cabin crew at Ryanair, and sometimes he would just talk about the conditions and just the work agreements, the contract agreements, and it was all mind-blowing to me how they get treated.
It is, as Andy said, it's great that Ryanair were able to retain the staff because so many other airlines and the airport authorities themselves and the facilities, they laid off stacks of people, and you just can't bring them back quickly or hire new people quickly because of all the training and security and goodness knows what else you have to go through. So it was definitely very much a good call. Andy, what's your sort of attitude towards fuel management in your car? I get a nosebleed in mine if it goes below a quarter.
I can't imagine your car ever going anywhere near a quarter, Nev. I've got to be honest.
I've got to admit, I take a very different attitude to work and to flying. It drives my wife wild because I will quite often ride round with the light on, and my answer is the car's lighter. I'm burning less fuel doing it this way.
Right. Okay.
Why do I want to carry a full tank of fuel around? That's just excess weight.
You can tell you've done some
research,
experiments.
So you actually do fuel planning for every trip that you do, and you put in the right amount of fuel. Right?
Yeah,
that's exactly what I do, and I don't need to worry about the problems that the next story have got because I'm firmly on the ground. That's
why I was asking you. So this is quite an interesting and worrying story, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And this one's from the Alf Herald. It's a Viva Colombia Airbus A320neo. Registration HK5378 was performing flight Victor Hotel 8332 from Cali to Rio, we'll call it Rio, Colombia. It was descending towards the airport when the crew aborted the approach at about flight level 180 and entered a hold for about 30 minutes. The aircraft subsequently climbed to flight level 370 and was en route to divert to Medellin when the crew again needed to abort the approach to Medellin at about 15,000 feet. The aircraft climbed back to flight level 210 and the crew declared an emergency and diverted to Montserrat, Colombia.
I think it is.
Where the aircraft finally landed on runway 32 about 2 hours 15 after aborting the approach to Rio and about 3 hours 20 after departing from Cali. The aircraft had about 100 kilos in its left fuel tank and about 110 kilos of fuel in its right tank. The totalizer showed 200 kilograms of fuel remaining. The airline reported the aircraft needed to abort the approach to Rio due to bad weather and then diverted to Medellin. While the aircraft was approaching Medellin, weather also impacted the aircraft and made a landing impossible. The crew therefore diverted where the aircraft landed safely. The aircraft had more than 180 minutes of fuel available, for the 80-minute flight.
Wow.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
why don't you just tell us about what the legal minima is, generally speaking?
Okay, so
or
really,
when you conduct a flight.
The flight plan and fuel plan is based up of various elements. You've got your taxi fuel, so obviously that's the fuel you need to taxi around the airports. Then you have the trip fuel, so that's from wheels off to wheels on. Then you have contingency fuel, so add a little bit extra in. It's normally 5%, or some airlines use statistical contingency fuel based on what's been burnt on that leg. But let's call it 5%. Then you can add tankering on top of that if the airline wants you to take fuel there because it's cheaper to carry it. And then there's extra fuel that you can decide to take. Now, in this sort of scenario here, they had an extra 100 minutes of fuel, which I think it's not a bad idea, to be honest, for an 80-minute flight, if the weather's going to be that bad. But something's gone... There's a lot of details missing in this story, obviously, but something's gone badly, badly wrong for them to end up with 200 kilos of fuel left. That is minutes. In the cruise, a 320neo will burn about 38 kilos a minute. That's in the cruise.
Wow.
Yeah. So at low level, on approach, you're looking at around... You're down to like 2, 3, 4 minutes of fuel there if you needed to put power on. That's it. That's all you've got.
What?
And the lights would have gone off pretty quickly.
Just as well they were in a Neo, not a CEO. Otherwise, they would not have made it at all, would they?
Yeah, that fuel would have gone. Yeah.
So what's
I want to know Andy's take on this because I did a little bit of math from Medellin to Monteria. They misspelled it in the article. Is about 150 miles, and then from Monteria to Riohacha is about 150 miles. So these guys flew around for close to 600 miles just diverting. But wouldn't the weather? Wouldn't you know that the weather that far apart is?
You would have looked at the forecasts, and you would have seen. Obviously, this weather was obviously forecast. You don't get terrible weather just out of nowhere everywhere. So if you knew that the weather was going to be bad, if I see anything like thunderstorms, that's immediately a ton. I'm taking 1,000 kilos extra minimum, and that'll give you 30 minutes of fuel initially, really, to play around with. But if it's like that everywhere, and also their diversion airfield must have had bad weather as well, which makes me think, why wasn't another diversion selected as well, a second alternate? I'd have absolutely filled the tanks up on that as well. Payload wouldn't have been an issue because these are really short flights.
right?
You wouldn't have been restricted on the weight that you could take, even with a full payload of passengers and bags. So until we get more details, I mean, can't really add much more. I think that there's got to be more to this than just weather diversion to end up that bad on fuel.
So obviously, with sort of both you and Armando here, I'm going to ask us as a nervous flyer. I mean, obviously, this story is almost like my complete nightmare. Essentially to. I mean, I read that story initially. It's like basically sort of 210 kilos of fuel, and I'm thinking, well, I don't know how much that is. It doesn't sort of mean a lot. So if you were going to do that flight per standard, what would you have normally had in the tanks?
300-mile flight.
You'd have had at least around 2 tons. I'd have expected to land with about 2 tons of fuel on board.
2 tons of fuel. Okay.
2 tons, 2,000 kilos, around that. That's sort of a minimum amount.
Oh my gosh!
A ton of fuel in an A320 for your 30 minutes final reserve. That's a full Mayday fuel emergency.
Right.
And at that point, you should be trying to put it on the ground as quickly as you possibly can.
Okay. So again,
the lowest I've ever seen in any safety reports, really, that I've looked at, you've landed with 600 kilos of fuel, and 600 kilos, that's bad. To land with 200 is
terrifying.
Is fresh seats in a flight deck.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Burn them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even in the Hawker, we always planned for landing with 2,000 pounds, which is just over 900 kilos, and that's
a little. Yeah.
That's after alternates, after weather, after everything. Contingency planning. We always have a contingency factor in there, safety factor, and in a small jet like the Hawker compared to the A320, we land with 2,000 pounds, 900 kilos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Chris from Texas is saying that hopefully the passengers weren't aware of the fuel issue. I mean, I guess that kind of information would have been spared from the.
Yeah, you wouldn't. I wouldn't tell the passengers that.
No,
there's no need for them to know.
Well, they were probably concerned from all the diverts. If you're diverting twice,
true.
Most people probably flown this flight already, and they know that if the first go around, the first divert, and then the second divert, they already know. They're probably already nervous.
Yeah. So I mean, is this unusual to have this many diverts basically on one flight? So in some respects. Oh, go on. No, sorry.
I'd say as well, the weather in this part of the world will be well known. It's like everywhere. All pilots in the area that they fly, they know what the weather's roughly going to be like at each time of the year. You know, like you get your lulls and high pressures in spring and sort of early autumn where the weather's nice. Then late autumn, it's going to be pretty. You know how we get all our storms in the autumn here in the UK? You've got big jet TVs doing all the videos in February and October. Oh, look at the crosswinds on that.
Yeah.
So you know what the weather's going to be like and the area that you fly in, what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
So that's the thing I don't get as well, because unless this crew is extremely inexperienced, why they didn't think we need to fill this thing right up.
Right.
Because as well, all it is on a meter for the weather, it's just a couple of letters. TS.
Yeah.
Like thunderstorms. TSRA.
Yeah.
It looks innocuous, but that can absolutely ruin your day.
Neil's got a question in the chat room. Neil says, when would you start losing engines? Presumably there's an unusable amount of fuel in the system.
I'd say you would get to zero on those tanks, but I would have to check that, and I don't think they actually give us that information in any of the manuals.
No, because it's assumed that would never happen.
Yeah, because there's so much fuel. You've got the fuel manifold, then you've got fuel that's taken off as well to cool the IDG. So there's quite a bit of fuel already down system from the pumps. So I don't actually know. It's nothing I've ever really thought about, and I don't ever
plan to. Yes, quite. No. Absolutely. It was. It's. I mean, it is very much a worrying story here. I mean, do you think there's a chance that some of this perhaps could have been pressure from the airline about how much was being carried?
Oh, well, you're getting into tricky areas.
Okay, no, that's fine.
All I can say is it could have been. It might not have been.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Andy had a great point. So Viva Colombia only has 10 destinations internally to Colombia. They fly to Miami and some places in Peru and Ecuador. But these pilots would have flown these 10 destinations hundreds of times, and they would know the weather. Riohacha is coastal, and then Monteria is about 50 miles inland, and then Medellin is mountainous. So I'm with Andy on this. Something else has to be missing, because the pilots would know the weather. The airline wouldn't dispatch them. They wouldn't dispatch unless they were forced to. Maybe they had an equipment malfunction or something. Maybe they,
or a fuel leak, maybe, I suppose, anything.
No, with a leak, I'd expect one side to be empty and the other side to be full.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Unless you've got a leak from both wing tanks.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I think we'll be returning to this story somehow.
Yeah.
I
think
we can wrap it up with Dirk's comment in the chat room, which is, it was Colombia, so 200 kilos in the tank. You know what I mean?
Okay, right. That's I think.
I've heard jet engines are burn on most things, but I didn't think they burn on that.
Right. Okay. Maybe we should move on before we get sued.
I think we skirted around that quite nicely.
Yes. Yeah. Do you think? Yeah.
It's definitely a story to follow in the future. There's a lot.
And I think there's going to be once we've seen the final report, then we've probably got some more info, obviously, and more accurate info too.
Agreed. Yeah, very much so.
Next one's over to Armando, and we've got more passenger difficulty in the cabin by the looks of things.
Really?
Every week, we just got to make a segment for this, but this one's from the Free Press over in Europe. A Delta flight was headed to Seoul, in Korea. It reversed its course this last Monday when it returned to Detroit after an issue with a customer on board that prompted police intervention. Well, Delta Flight 283 took off just before midnight, was only in the air for about 2 hours before it returned to Wayne County Airport because the flight crew had an issue with what they are calling an unruly passenger, according to a Delta spokesperson. The flight reached about Minnesota. It's not very far, especially when you're flying to Seoul. It was expected to last about 15 hours and had 192 passengers on board. So this confrontation with the passenger was on an Airbus A350. Obviously, it's going to cause an extensive delay. And what ended up happening is it conflicted with the crew duty day. So when they returned to Detroit, they timed out. So the whole flight had to be canceled, and just a complete inconvenience by this one person. Now, that flight was met by law enforcement professionals at the airport, according to Delta. The Wayne County Airport Authority told the Free Press on Tuesday that the customer was actually experiencing a medical emergency, and that law enforcement, once everything was settled, did not take any action and instead transported the passenger to a hospital. Delta Airlines declined to further provide any details on this. The request, they're kind of just gone blank, but they just issued a statement saying, "We apologize for the delay to our customers' travels, and they're working to get everyone to their destinations as soon as possible." So very interesting on this one. Now, we've talked about this, where whether it's some kind of incapacitation, whether it's alcohol, where's the line between just unruly behavior and a legit medical situation? And when the first thing that came to mind reading this was, I don't know if you guys remember, right before I left the UK, we had an individual that actually drove through the gate at RAF Mildenhall, and he was chased down by the police.
Oh yeah.
He was shot at by the police. His somehow, by a stroke of luck, he ended up just taking a turn, ended up on the flight line, and the police officer that ended up using his rifle to disable the vehicle, it rolled into an Osprey. But this individual was very lucky to be alive. But was pretty quick when they dragged him out of the vehicle, they realized that there was no malintent and that it was actually a medical situation, a behavioral health situation that had, transpired in him trying to do this. And neither the U.S. Air Force nor the MOD police took any action on this individual, and he was actually transported to a hospital. Lucky for him, he wasn't shot. But
I think in the
I
air,
must say, if you're cabin crew and you're charged with the duty of sorting this sort of situation out, it must be very hard to differentiate between people who are either deliberately being a nuisance because they've had too much to drink or worse, or whether somebody's having a bit of a mental breakdown or some kind of other episode like that. That must be very difficult, and it's not always obvious, I would imagine.
Andy, have you ever experienced anything like this?
Not. I've had plenty of medicals, and that seems to have all I suffered from this summer, diverting constantly. But you find, let's just call it, this unruly passenger was a medical situation. It all depends what information on the flight deck side that you get from behind you, because of course you can't go out, because this could be a ploy or anything to try and get you out. And communication is so important, because ultimately, either way, if it was a medical issue or an unruly passenger, my reaction's probably going to be the same, and I'm going to want them off the aircraft.
Yeah.
So a diversion to offload them would be inevitable. I mean, I feel so much for people who do have these episodes and stuff. I mean, mental health issues still aren't properly understood or accepted by society, which is a sad state of affairs, really. And it could just be other passengers because from a story saying, "Oh, he was unruly," or he or she, sorry. But yeah, from my point of view, if I'm getting the message that something's going on down the back and the cabin crew are having trouble controlling them or they're causing problems, then they've got to go.
Yeah, I agree.
And that, I suppose, again, apologies for the naivety on this one, but again, I presume that is the captain's prerogative. If you are unhappy to carry a passenger, there needs to be no further discussion about it. Essentially, your word is final.
Yeah.
The editor's decision is final, isn't that right?
Quite,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. Which, in some respects, I completely understand. I mean, I can understand why it would be frustrating for that particular individual, but then, and obviously, but also if there is a medical situation going on, I suppose you could argue that it could potentially not be safe for them to remain on the aircraft as well, because they need medical assistance.
Yes.
Yeah, the only time this has happened to me, I had a passenger that had an anxiety attack on the aircraft. I had just left Pittsburgh, and I was on the way to Baltimore, and we diverted into a small town, Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And once we landed, he wanted to get back on the airplane, and he said, "No, I'm fine." And we said, "No, you're not fine. You're going to get in that ambulance." But as the captain, this is another good point, right? Like your sphere of influence and authority ends at sort of the wingtip,
Yeah.
Then it's up to the gate agents and the company to, once they are off your airplane, that's for law enforcement and medical professionals. And we very quickly just said, no, you're not coming back on board. Now that introduced, and this is a good Andy point, where you divert. For us, it introduced another challenge in that Johnstown was not a TSA secure airport. So we were going from a TSA terminal, Pittsburgh, to TSA terminal in Baltimore. We diverted to a non-TSA airport. So once we landed in Baltimore, everyone had to get rescreened.
Oh, wow.
So they got on a bus with their luggage and everything, rescreened. So all of those individuals lost their flights and connections and everything. But it just, one thing just introduces more and more challenges.
So forgive my naivety. Nev probably knows this, but I don't. But
you don't have to apologize, Matt. This is why we do the podcast.
Okay, it's just why? First of all, what is the TSA? I know I've heard it. Obviously, I know like Dr. Steph mentioned it. You've mentioned it. All that kind of thing. What is TSA, and why does it matter that if you go to a non-TSA airport that you then have to literally do all that kind of screening? Why is that why is that like a disaster almost? Because presumably, as long as they haven't been lost, if you like, within the airport, why do they have to then yet be re-screened? I mean, as long as they haven't left departures.
Yeah, well, it's similar to over there. If you were making a connection, let's say you come in from Edinburgh, you fly into Heathrow, and then you're connecting over to, I don't know, pick up another airport in the UK, and the entire time you were screened in Edinburgh. You've stayed within the screened area at Heathrow or your connection airport, so you're always sort of controlled. And then even at your arrival airport, you are in a secure area until you exit through all the little red signs. Right. And at that point, that's why all the little red hands are there, and they say if you go any further, you will have to go back through security. For us, or for anyone that diverts to a non-TSA airport, if you keep them on the airplane, you could argue that they were under your control the entire time. But we had a rule: we cannot refuel with people on board. We had to deplane them to refuel.
Right.
So in that case, now they are. This is an open airport. Does not, here in America, these small airports, you're lucky if they have a fence.
I see. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Unlike the UK or Europe, these municipal airports are completely not secure at all. There's no police presence. There's no fences. There's no anything. So you can literally drive from your car, from your house, right onto the ramp if you wanted to. And in this particular scenario, that's what happened. And
right.
Now the major airlines or the regional airlines, when they divert, they're going to talk to their company, and their company is going to tell them, because here's another thing: you need to divert somewhere where you have the ground equipment and you have an agreement with someone. So, whatever airline that you fly for, Andy, the Acme Orange, you have to land somewhere where the ground support person or a third party is going to be able to handle the airplane and deal with your needs, right?
Well, I diverted earlier this summer to Vienna, thinking it was a place that we still flew to, and we didn't. So
Right.
that took a bit of time to sort out. But who I work for generally just let us get on with it, because as well in Europe, most of the airfields that we fly, it can take us, and we probably fly there already. And unless we really, really, really need to put it on the ground super, super quick, then we don't really need to consult with operations, because we will end up in an airfield that they can give us something.
Okay.
But yeah, that I felt a bit silly after that.
Yes.
That outdated route map that was in the seatbelt pocket in the cockpit.
It was in the box. I thought, all right, we'll go. Let's go there.
Well, an aircraft that you can't put into anywhere is an A380, of course. And our good friend Michelle on Turning Left for Less has been talking about some new or revised routes that British Airways are flying the A380 to, which starting from the 26th of March until the 28th of October 2023, next year. So now we've got, I think, nearly all of the A380s back at Heathrow. They're going to be running a Boston one daily, Chicago O'Hare one daily, Dallas Fort Worth one daily, 3 times a week to Dubai, twice daily to Johannesburg, 7 times a week to Miami, with selected weeks in April and May. There's going to be 10 weekly, 1 to San Francisco and 1 to Washington Dulles. So that's some good news. I'm hopefully going on the A380 to DFW in I think it's January or February next year. So it'll be the first time I've actually been on a flying A380.
Wow.
But I've been on 2 that have been stationary on the ground before, but never up in the air. So
now, I know we've covered stories in the past, haven't we, about how it's almost like the A380 sort of arrived to the party a bit late, didn't it? Because it was sort of, it arrived essentially when the 4-engine thing was sort of not a thing anymore, and
I
stuff
think
like that.
I know it's trying to rewrite history here, but if the aircraft had been designed and built, I don't know, 5 years before, perhaps, it might have been a different story. I'd be interested to know, if you're operating an A380, what the minimum load factor is to make the whole thing work commercially. It must be quite high, I would imagine. They've got to fill as many seats as they possibly can and have cargo on board as well, I would imagine, to make it viable, because you don't want to start running that kind of aircraft half empty.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know it's one of those sort of Marmite aircraft, isn't it? Quite often, where cabin crew absolutely hate it, but from a passenger perspective, usually the passengers quite like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess with any airline there must be that tolerance, isn't there? It's like, you need to it needs to be at least half full, otherwise it's not it's not covering its costs. Like that.
Sometimes, I mean, airlines, if they've got 2 flights that are going fairly close together, but they're both not very full. I mean, they have been known to combine flights,
right?
Just, one, but of course with the A380 that's not really possible to do that, because there's only, I think British Airways have only got 12 aircraft, so you're then starting to eat into the other fleet, I would imagine. Well, it's anyway. I think it's great to see that it's flying again, and there's some more routes planned for next year.
Yeah, I think it's great. Have Armando and Andy, have you had any experience on the 380?
Just a high fly one that was parked there at Farnborough.
At Farnborough, yeah.
That's right, it was.
I've never flown in one.
I've had several flights on a 380.
Have you? Oh, so how? As I say, I know that cabin crew. As I say, one of my friends is cabin crew and flies the not very regularly to their delight. And I mean, their complaints are things like the galley is completely not fit for purpose and things like that. But in terms of like the passenger experience, I mean, how did you find it?
I've flown it in economy and I've flown it in business.
Oh, hello.
On Emirates, and a long way as well. I've been all the way down to Auckland and back in one.
Wow.
When that was when I was doing my flight training. And in economy, yes, it's a lovely, quiet aeroplane. But business, Emirates business is just delightful. Very nice.
Different world, yeah.
Yeah, we did it. The last time I did it was to Sri Lanka in October 2018. Yeah, we took our 4-month-old daughter to Sri Lanka for a few days for some cricket. And it was lovely, really nice.
So, I mean, okay, well, let's stick with the Emirates model then. I mean, have you done anything in the 777 sort of along those lines like economy, or has it always been the 380 for you so far?
No, yeah, I've been in 777 economy and 777 business as well.
And so how did they compare? I mean, was it essentially the same sort of experience almost, or you know, did one have the edge?
The Emirates business class on the 380 is a bit packed in, if you ask me.
Okay.
Whereas on the 777, it seems to be it's a bit more airy and more room.
Okay, interesting.
I just need to pick you up on one thing, Andy. You said that you took your young daughter to Sri Lanka to see the cricket.
Yes.
I think you wanted to see the cricket, and she just happened to come along with you.
Come along with the ride, yes.
Yeah, she didn't have much of a choice.
No. How old was she, just out of interest?
4 months old.
Right, yeah. Okay. Wow.
So she wasn't able to name the team or the rules of the game.
Nothing. I mean, she's getting quite good now. She had a photo taken with a lot of the first team because they were staying in our hotel. She loved it.
Oh.
Mark Wood still remembers her.
No, very good. Okay, that's what we like to hear. Well, I mean, I've yet to sort of, I've yet to experience it, but I hope I get to try one before they all come out of service and things. But it's good to. I mean, bearing in mind, I remember sort of in the lead up and during lockdown, Nev. I mean, we were talking about, you know, especially the BA 380s not flying again at one point. So to sort of hear them back out on, you know, in the air and that, I think is great news for aviation.
Yeah, well, they're all being stored at Madrid, or most of them are being stored at Madrid because there was no capacity at Heathrow, and also because of the better weather in Madrid as well. So, you know, less chance of corrosion of the airframe and that kind of thing, I would imagine. But Matt, on this particular story, Qantas is actually swapping out the A380 for the Dreamliner on some
flights. Right. Yes, okay.
I have to say, these segues are beautiful tonight. Really good.
this show was just not thrown together, you know. There's proper production involved here.
My goodness me.
Creme de la creme tonight.
Of course, absolutely.
Sorry.
One would expect nothing less. Nev did the show notes. That's what
just wait till we get to the military where we just drop 250-pound bombs on everything. I segue everything with acronyms so you guys can't keep
Excellent.
up.
Yeah, good. Yeah, duly noted. Can't wait. Right, so simpleflying.com is the website. And the headline is Qantas swaps the A380, as Nev said, for the Boeing 787 on Melbourne to Los Angeles flights. Passengers booked in first-class seats on Qantas Melbourne to Los Angeles A380s are now in business class on the 787 and are not at all happy about it. I can well imagine. It seems that the return of the A380 to Australia's skies is losing its appeal to Qantas, much to the annoyance of those who want a truly first-class experience and live in Melbourne. As reported by Executive Traveller, recent updates to Qantas flight schedules show that the planned A380 rollout on flights from Melbourne to Los Angeles has been abandoned. Initially, little concern for passengers, however. For those looking for the memorable Airbus A380, whoa, my machine's just gone completely bananas. It's just jumped massively and I've lost my place. One moment, caller, please hold. As reported by Executive Traveller, recent updates to the Qantas flight schedules show the planned Airbus A380 rollout on flights from Melbourne to Los Angeles has been abandoned. Initially scheduled for late March, the A380 has been replaced by the Boeing 787-9, which is probably of little concern for most passengers. However, those looking for the memorable Airbus A380 first class cabin and upper deck premium lounge. The switch to the Dreamliner is not going to go down well at all. Qantas is spending heavily to return the A380, so cutting back their schedule seems counterintuitive. To find out what's behind the change, Simple Flying reached out to Qantas, who told us that it's part of their Australian dollar 200 million. That's 125.4 million US dollars investing for our customers program. In this market update last week, Qantas CEO Alan Joyce spoke about providing a buffer against unexpected challenges that could disrupt services and passengers. Qantas said it would reduce capacity and place aircraft on standby to plug gaps if and when they arise. Today, the spokesperson told Simple Flying this change in capacity, that is, the switch from the A380 to the 787-9, is part of the strategy to protect the integrity of schedules and give certainty to operations. Qantas is leaving around 20% of its flying capacity in reserve and ready to be brought in to reduce cancellations and delays. This means up to 20 aircraft, including 10 narrow bodies, 6 wide bodies and 4 regional aircraft will be on standby across Qantas and Jetstar networks. This is a temporary measure as the as operational certainty increases. The reserve capacity will be added back into everyday operations. I mean, I
spoke. A lot of reserve capacity, isn't there?
There is a lot of reserve
20
capacity.
aircraft. Gosh,
it does seem like. I mean, how does that compare to the amount of aircraft they have across their network, though? I mean, I guess.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, that's aircraft on the ground is a very expensive thing to do, isn't it? For just reserve situations, bearing in mind that they're all sort of back and flying now after COVID. I mean, there are some routes which are still troublesome. Some of those ones into China, for example, but that's a really expensive proposition, isn't it? If you think about it, and also the crews as well that would be flying those aircraft.
I guess the decision behind it. I mean, I guess it's easier to pop an A380 aircraft on one that's been run by a 787 in terms of capacity, if you see what I mean. It's easier to do it that way round, obviously, than if you have an A380 that either goes tech or ends up in the wrong place or something like that. You've then got a problem of a significant number of passengers who've been inconvenienced as a result. So, I mean, in some respects, I get it.
It's not the end of the world, really, because, I mean, the Dreamliner's a pretty nice aircraft. So,
yeah.
If you were told that they're not operating the 380, but you're going to be on a 787-9, that's not a disaster, is it, really?
Unless you've booked and spent the money for first, of course. Which is the issue. Yeah.
I'm sure there'd be negotiations with the company.
I dare say.
Is this an attempt to save money on fuel?
Could be.
It could be, couldn't it? If you think about it. 2 engines, better than 4 in those situations. Yeah.
And the cost of fuel at the moment is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
And depending on how much fuel you have hedged, etc., it could just be a way to offset that for a while.
Yeah.
And speaking of saving fuel, Jet2.com, traditionally a 737 and 757 operator, have got some new aircraft on the way.
Ooh.
Yes, they have. And hang on, I've just clicked off where it should be. Jet2 increases order for the A320neo family to 98. So Jet2.com has placed an incremental order for 35 A320neo aircraft, taking its total commitment to the family to 98 aircraft. The latest agreement comes just over a year since Jet2 placed its first order for 36 A321neos in August 21, followed by further commitments thereby securing its growth needs as demand continues to outpace supply. The A320neos will be configured for 180 seats with an airspace cabin featuring innovative lighting, new seating products, and 60% large overhead bins for added personal storage. The 320neo family incorporates new generation engines and sharklets, which together deliver more than 20% fuel and CO2 savings, as well as a 50% noise reduction. Passengers are benefiting throughout the trip from Airbus's award-winning airspace interior, which brings the latest cabin technology to the A330 family. By the end of September 2022, the A320neo family has accumulated over 8,500 firm orders from more than 130 customers worldwide.
Wow. I mean, that's quite a coup for Airbus, isn't it, Andy? You know,
It is.
Switching the whole airline out. I don't know whether they're going to keep their 737s and their 757s, but even so, this is an addition to them, at least, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I believe the 757s are slowly on their way out. At Manchester, I still get the joy of seeing them every day, and I love that triple spool RB211. You can't miss that noise.
Oh, yeah.
But what are they supposed to replace the 757s with? The only product really available is the 21.
Yeah.
Boeing don't offer anything else at the moment.
And of course, Jet2 do offer those longer routes, don't they? You know, Sharm el Sheikh and down to the Canaries and a few other ones. So those aircraft are nicely suited for the longer routes too, aren't they? I would imagine, in terms of fuel burn and also, you know, passenger comfort as well.
Oh yeah, big difference between the 737 and the 737 NG and the Neo engines. Huge. I mean, the CEO 320 engines, they're a variant of the CFM56 that's on the NG, slightly older than the NG, and the fuel burn difference is massive between the types. So yeah, it's a good way to save money. It's a much wider and bigger cabin as well in the 737. But yeah, it's good because it's keeping them competitive.
And actually, if you think about it, we're talking about timing of aircraft production and this sort of thing. It's just as well that the Neo aircraft and you know aircraft from other manufacturers as well are now so much more fuel efficient than they ever were, because of the cost of fuel is just sky high, isn't it?
Yeah, and they haven't had the issues that the Max has had as well, which has made a big difference.
Well, we could segue quite nicely onto that story, couldn't we? Because Armando is going to tell us about the latest situation with the MAX certification from Boeing.
Yeah, we've talked about all the things individually. Now we're just going to put them together. So Boeing, just this week, won a little bit of support from a Republican senator, as well as a major customer, in its bid to convince the U.S. Congress to extend the deadline to win certification for the two new 737 MAX variants. They are currently facing a late December deadline for the FAA to certify the MAX 7 and the MAX 10. After that date, all planes are required to have a modern cockpit alerting system, which they currently don't have, in order to be certified by the FAA. Obviously, if they go past that deadline, that could mean significant delays for the new MAX aircraft deployment, unless Congress grants a waiver to extend this deadline. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham told Reuters that he supports attaching a MAX deadline waiver to some kind of spending bill or another measure before Congress. I think that's a weird thing that we do. You can't just introduce legislation. You have to attach it to something. The senator said that they're going to fight as hard as we can to get Boeing the opportunity to prove that the airplane works and that it does work. Now, the requirements were approved by Congress in late 2020 as part of the FAA certification reforms after those two 737 MAX crashes. Earlier this last Wednesday, United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby also backed the extension, saying that it makes sense to have a common 737 alerting system. He said it's the right safety outcome, and that changing the cockpit is a bad safety outcome. United in 2017 ordered 100 MAX 10s. Without an extension, United would convert some of those orders to MAX 8s and 9s. And according to their CEO, like we're just talking about, they're going to buy more Airbus A321 aircraft, which would obviously impact Boeing pretty significantly.
Isn't it interesting how the tone of this piece from Reuters is now talking about a lot more government involvement compared to just the FAA and the certification authorities?
Yeah, I think this was, we talked about these crashes and how not just social media, but the media really latched onto there have been plenty of aircraft in history that had problems, but this particular scenario and these two crashes, while it is an incredible loss of life, were latched onto by the media in a way that I hadn't seen before, at least not in my 20 something years of flying. And that forced representatives in the US government to do something in the name, whatever you believe, in the name of their constituents for safety. I don't know that the US Congress regularly gets involved in the certification of aircraft. I think this is a pretty unique situation. They painted themselves in a corner by introducing this legislation and getting involved, and now they're stuck with it. And here in the US, a lot of your congressional decisions are made by, how much is it going to benefit your constituency? So now they're potentially, by rules that they made a couple of years ago in response to the crashes, are going to actually hurt their districts by, Boeing potentially losing jobs, airlines cutting jobs, and business going to Airbus. So I think it was a very unique situation in that the government got involved in this.
Armando,
here we are.
Is this essentially about fitting a proper ICAS system?
Yeah, I think we had the MCAS that was installed on there, and that, was it the cause of the problems? Yes, it was, but there was debate over that too, whether the training was really the problem, and then the cockpit alerting system, the ICAS, is different, and they're basically just stuck saying you can certify it because with the current system up to the end of this year. Otherwise, you guys are going to have to replace the whole ICAS system and that whole essentially ICAS system. Yeah.
And I agree with them. I think it does need replacing. It's a 707 alerting system essentially. The two panels on either side of the glare shield, and having to look and see what systems it's not a modern system.
Well, and that was kind of the problem with the whole airplane, wasn't it?
Yeah. They've just engineered it. I mean, I think they've done a great job of engineering it to the point they've got it to, that it's still flying. But now's the time to give up, surely.
They can't. They don't have any clean sheet designs. If they give up, they lose. That's
Boeing's problem.
Yeah, that is Boeing's problem. They should have seen it coming. And Micah's making some great points in the chat room too. They're just relying on these systems from 757, 767, 707s. While Airbus has been on the cutting edge of innovation.
Yeah. So, I'm not saying that as an Airbus fanboy. I love the 75, the 76. One of my favorite. I've always wanted to fly the 75. But safety is more important than anything else, than profits and everything. And if you don't produce a safe aircraft, as they've seen, then it's going to harm you anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And the spotlight is really on them, isn't it? So yeah. Well, let's have a look at another manufacturer, one we don't talk about that often, the Embraer series. And Chewy, this is on the EmbraerCommercialAviation.com website. It says that Chewy Group has selected Embraer's E195-E2, the quietest and most efficient aircraft under 150 seats, to join the TUI Fly Belgium fleet. TUI is one of the world's leading tourism groups and will take delivery of 3 of these aircraft from AerCap on long-term lease. The aircraft from AerCap's existing fleet and powered by Pratt & Whitney GTF engines will be delivered in a comfortable 136-seat single-class configuration in the first half of 2023. We are thrilled to add that the E195-E2 to our Belgium fleet. Operating on short and medium-haul routes, the new aircraft is the most efficient one in the market. It uses less fuel, has a longer range, whilst at the same time is 50% quieter and emits up to a third less carbon dioxide. The airplanes will operate mostly out of Antwerp, where they'll be flying to more distant airports, which will allow us to expand into new holiday destinations from northern Belgium, said Marco Chomperlik, who's the Chief Airline Officer of TUI. The selection of the E195-E2 is an important milestone to make TUI's fleet even more efficient in support of our sustainability goals. Working together with AerCap, Embraer and Pratt & Whitney, we have agreed on an attractive package that enables TUI to provide travellers from regional airports in Belgium an even better start to their holidays, added Tom Chandler, who's Managing Director, Fleet and Asset Management of TUI Group. We're very pleased to announce the lease placement of 3 of these aircraft with TUI. AerCap has a long history of working with the company, and we are excited to be a part of their fleet renewal plan, said Peter Anderson, Chief Commercial Officer of AerCap. These aircraft are the perfect fit to support TUI's operations with greater versatility and improved efficiencies, enabling them to meet their sustainability commitments. We wish TUI every success with the E2 jets, and we look forward to working with them as these aircraft deliver. Martin Holmes, who's Chief Commercial Officer of Embraer Commercial Aviation, added, "We welcome TUI, already operators of the first generation E190, to the E2 family of operators. The economics of the Dash E2 combined with its comfort is a win-win for TUI, allowing the operator to increase capacity and delight their guests while still reducing fuel costs and lowering emissions. We're pleased to continue our long relationship with TUI and thank AerCap for their partnership." Well, I've not been on a 195 yet, but I've been on a lot of the 190s out of London City Airport recently with the BA City Flyer. And I must say, I really like those aircraft. They're really nice regional jets, and actually they can go quite long distances as well. So it's perfectly comfortable on a slightly medium haul route too, I would say. So have you been on a Embraer before, Andy?
Yeah, I've been on your City Flyer ones up between City and Edinburgh when I used to live in Canary Wharf. Really comfy, nice and quiet. Was it Steve Giordano who was whinging about them on Twitter the other day? Did you see the rant that he had? They got the Embraer, was it CEO or somebody involved, and he decided to delete it because he was saying how terrible he thought they were flying. No. But as a passenger, very nice. I quite like him. And he had the audacity to complain about the control column. Oh. When it was pointed out to him that was the same as Concorde, he soon backed down. Right.
I was going to say the ram
horn. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
But I like them. Legroom's good. Headroom's good, I think, as well. Nice.
Yeah, I used to jump seat when I was Pittsburgh based. I used to jump seat on the E190s, E195s, and it's an amazing airplane. Actually, I think, Andy, you would love it from up front. It's very, very similar to an Airbus, and flies great. I mean, I watched those guys, those crews, and it's for a regional airliner. You almost feel like you don't need to move up to a bigger airplane because they're pretty darn big.
Yeah.
For a regional, they stand tall and they behave, and they have all the same systems as a bigger airliner. Really, really nice airplanes from the front too.
I must say, going off of London City Airport, Andy, holding the thrust against the brakes before they do release them, it goes off the runway like a scalded cat, I would imagine.
It does, doesn't it? A friend of mine used to fly them for Flybe, and he's now a type rating instructor on them as well. Maybe I should get a type rating on it, get that on my license.
Yeah.
For fun.
Well, just to try and keep up. Just trying to keep up with Armando. I mean, he's got so many type ratings, no one can keep up with him anymore. So,
it's an amazing number.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we always say that general aviation is, quite expensive here in the UK, and a lot of rules and regulations. But this story seems to go some way towards some simplification, Andy.
Yeah, well, the UK Civil Aviation Authority launches consultation on the simplification and rationalisation of general aviation pilot licences. So the CAA has today, this was on the 18th of October, proposed a simpler process to gain a pilot licence and training for the general aviation community. Draft proposals published in CAP, which stands for Civil Aviation Publication 2335, Phase 1 strategy direction include creating a single set of private pilot licenses, so PPL, for aeroplanes and helicopters that comply with International Civil Aviation Organization standards, that's ICAO standards. Other draft proposals include creating another single set of aeroplane and helicopter pilot licenses that do not comply with international standard. Such sub-licenses are designed for flight in UK airspace only and subject to certain limitations, which would make it easier for potential pilots to gain a license. Better integrate the syllabuses of the sub-ICAO license with the internationally recognized PPL to allow holders to progress more easily from one to the other. And the sub-ICAO license could use operational limitations borrowed from the current microlight airplane community and allow ways for holders to progressively remove those limitations, as well as the sub-ICAO status. They want to develop an approach for sailplanes and balloons. I still don't believe you need a license for balloon, it flies you. Including a license for commercial passenger carrying balloon operations, which are a significant element of UK ballooning. Develop how existing licenses are maintained and kept valid under any new system the CAA creates, while minimizing undue disruption and costs on users, flying schools, and themselves. So a working group has been established with key community experts, including general aviation associations, as well as flying instructors and PPL students. And Michael McDonald, co-head of the CAA's General Aviation and RPAS unit, said, this project is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to simplify, rationalize, and re-examine the GA license regime. We've worked closely with and listened to the GA community and thank them for their continued involvement. We also want to continue to hear their views so that we get this right. We would encourage everyone with an interest in GA to get involved and participate in this consultation. This project will take some time to work through, and we anticipate the need to have a series of consultations, and we hope this will help make the licensing and training process simpler for all flyers. A collaborative approach was taken to ensure we fairly reflected views from the wider GA community, and we established a working group of key GA community experts, including GA associations. Yep, I've already said that bit, and want to thank them all for their continued support on this project. Well, I think it's good.
It always worries me when there's a long press release to talk about simplification. But do you think this is a move in the right direction, Andy?
Yeah, because what did we have? We used to have the national license, a PPL license, the LAPL license, you got the microlight licenses, you got the balloon licenses. If they can streamline it all and make it easy to jump from one to the other and get costs down and get more people flying in these subcategories, why not? I think it's a great idea.
Now, Armando, presumably you don't have any of this in the US. It's a far simpler system anyway, isn't it, for the most part?
No, actually, it's pretty similar. We have your private pilot certificate, but almost underneath that, and this was an effort a few years ago to get more people into aviation, as well as keeping people in aviation longer with reduced medical standards and reduced training. We have a sport license. We have a recreational pilot. We instituted our light sport aircraft category way after you guys did in Europe. EASA had it for a long time, and the CAA had it for a long time. I think the US saw that and said, hey, we need to create something like that, and that's how light sport came about. But no, we have a similar thing now where you can, essentially go get a recreational pilot license, and it just restricts you on the weather and the type of airplanes that you can do, or you can get a sport pilot certificate, and little differences here. I was actually going to ask what the difference is between what they're proposing and the LAPL. It sounded pretty similar to me.
Yeah.
Or is the LAPL also an ICAO?
I think the LAPL was an EASA thing. Basically, you just needed the same medical as a heavy goods vehicle driver. So it wasn't as stringent, but then, of course, there was a lot less you could do with it and fly with it. It was, I'd always call it a light PPL personally, but it gave people who couldn't get a Class 2 the opportunity to go flying, which is great.
Yeah, we have over here what's called basic med, which if at any point any point in your life you've been issued a third-class medical or any medical, you can essentially keep flying with just a driver's license, regular driver's license.
Yeah. So they got Dirk says LAPL is EASA, so obviously now we're out of that, sadly.
So rebrand the LAPL.
Yeah, rebrand it and realign it. Yeah, that sounds like corporate speak. That
That would never do.
No, perish the thought.
Well, that was a really interesting roundup of the commercial aviation, I think. Thanks, guys, for your superb input, as always. Next up, it's part 5 of the Chris Burwell interview. Chris has written the book called 9 Lives, and Nick very kindly did the interview for us, and we've put this into a 6-part series. So this is the penultimate part of it, and again, fascinating to listen to Chris of his time in the RAF. And here he is talking to Nick again.
Now, I'm sure your promotion to group captain was very welcome, but I expect that the extension of your tour to take in air operations over Iraq in '93 must have left you slightly with mixed feelings. The mission you flew over the Iraqi SAM site left us on a knife edge. I really enjoyed your description of that in the book. In the event, was it all fairly quiet?
Yes, it was. There was, as you say, there was the SAM launch when I was out there, but otherwise it tended to be pretty quiet. But of course, every time you flew, you were very well aware that you were going into the Badlands, because you go and visit the intelligence officer and our army major, who give you a full briefing before you went about what SAM sites we knew about, and they'd take you through on the map. You'd look at your route and see where those SAM rings, where you were going to be vulnerable. We always flew as pairs. We wouldn't go as singletons, so you had mutual support. So it was an interesting time, and we flew as constituted pairs while we were out there, and so you just got into a nice routine. I had my American exchange officer actually flying with me, Joe Andrews, who is very, very competent, very steady sort of guy to have with me. So that was good. Yeah,
the American exchange officers had their fair share of problems in the United Kingdom. I do remember, but he obviously was one of the good ones.
Yes. Yeah.
Your book is delightfully peppered with amusing anecdotes, but the story of your Harrier with a flat battery struck me as a particularly good one. Could you perhaps tell the listeners about that?
Well, yeah. Shortly before I left the squadron, we took 4 aircraft down to a Spanish naval base just near Madrid. And it's called a Ranger, so it's a navigational exercise, but it gives you the opportunity to take the aircraft away. It is useful because you have to flight plan it. It also provides the Spanish Navy with the opportunity to get used to your aircraft, so NATO interoperability. So they have to refuel it and help you support the aircraft while you're away from home. But also, of course, if you go on a Friday and you can't come back till the Monday, it gives you the opportunity for a weekend in Madrid. So the selection of the crews, it was my swan song off the squadron, but it came about that we decided to go down to Madrid because one of my junior pilots, a guy called Chris Norton, very, very capable guy, he had a very good friend down in Madrid, a young lady, and there was nothing going on between them. He was happily married, but he knew this young lady, but he said, well, if we go to Madrid, boss, she'll look after us and take us to all the right places to go and see it. So I said, right, okay, Snorts, right, we'll go to Madrid. So a couple of my flight commanders jumped on the bandwagon. So we had a 4-ship, myself, Mike Harwood, Jerry Humphreys, and Snorts, Chris Norton. So we went off down to Madrid, everything went fine. We landed in Spain, sorted the aircraft out, got them refueled, and went off for a weekend. Had a wonderful weekend in Madrid, courtesy of this young lady who showed us to all the great places to go to in Madrid. Came into work on the Monday morning, and Mike Harwood had left the refueling panel of his aircraft open. Now, if you...
I know Mike.
Yeah. I shouldn't have mentioned the name, I've dropped him in it now. But if you leave the refueling panel open on the GR7, then it powers up the refueling circuits, which don't take a lot of power, but over a weekend, they're going to drain the battery, and that's exactly what happened. So Mike got there and went, oh, battery's dead, boss. That's great. Okay, so we're then, right, we've got a sick jet, so what should we do? So we then sort of went, who's doing what? So Mike said, well, I've got to get back because I've got this very famous World War II guy, Air Force pilot, visiting me tonight at Wittering. So, right, okay, so you bust the jet, but you're going to take one of our serviceable aircraft and go off home. Great, thanks, Mike. And then Jerry Humphries says, well, actually, boss, my wife's about to have a baby, so I really do need to get back. So, okay, you take another one.
Yeah. Ship.
So it finished up with the boss and the junior pilot having to sort the shambles out. So anyway, what do we do? So we asked the Spanish. They had absolutely no ideas at all. Great NATO interoperability. And so I just thought about it and thought, well, what we could do, because we had an auxiliary power unit, we could fire up the APU on the aircraft that's got the good battery. Then we could get the battery out, put it into the other aircraft, fire that APU up, and then we've got power to both aircraft, and then the dead battery will charge up from the APU and all this sort of thing. So I phoned up the squadron and said, hey guys, what do you think about this? And they went, yeah, okay, boss, sounds all right to us, go for it. So we finished up the APU. APUs are incredibly noisy things, and so we finished up the APU running, and it's deafening noise. So you finish up the back hatch, which is very close to where the APU is, pulling out a battery, and then staggering across and getting it into the other aircraft, and then firing the APU up on that one. And eventually we got both APUs up and running, we got both engines started, and we eventually got airborne and got back to Wittering.
Oh, brilliant. I love that story. Yeah. Now, taking over RAF Scampton as the station commander was, as you remind us, moving to a historically important airfield. Did that involve you in any interesting events?
We had a number of interesting events, particularly to do with the closure of the station, sadly, because I found out shortly before I was taking over. I was actually at Scampton doing some work-up training before I'd taken command. I think I was doing the Bulldog competent to instruct course at the time. The CNC, Sir Christopher Cogle, arrived, and he took me to one side and said, we think the station's going to close, but we've decided you're going to stay on and you're going to stay here. You will take over the station, but it may be a short tour, so just to warn you. So I could see that was coming up. So it was only a few months into my tour that I found out that the station was going to close. As an aside, interestingly enough, of course, it never has closed. It's continued to operate. The Red Arrows were moved down to Cranwell, then they've moved back to Scampton, all this sort of thing. And it went on for years, and Scampton is still operating even today. So we never actually closed RAF Scampton down, but I was the man that was responsible for closing the station down. So we did have a number of farewells to RAF Scampton, which was great. We had a big dinner night for a lot of notable people who'd been associated with Scampton, and important people in the local area like the Mayor of Lincoln and so on. And so that was one big dinner night we had. We also had a closed down hangar party where we had about 800 people in the hangar for the night. We had the Red Arrows display, we had the Battle of Britain Lancaster come in.
The Station Commander's Fund must have been shrinking.
Well, I had a very good OC admin wing, a guy called Dave Gardner, who sadly is no longer with us, but Dave Gardner did a great job of finding money for various things, and we did. I think we did Scampton proud, and saw it off work very well at that time.
Absolutely. Now, despite attending two of the best courses available for those hoping to reach very senior ranks, your tour as group captain plans didn't seem to go well and led you to decide to retire prematurely, even when the Air Secretary offered you an olive branch, and you left without finding out what that job would have entailed. Do you ever regret that?
I do think about it. I don't regret it because my life took an interesting turn thereafter, or in work sense, two very interesting turns. I think military is interesting because if you're in a position like I was, and I was 46 years old at the time. I was 9 years away from taking a full pension. I think it's quite an attractive thing, especially if you're the group captain 1-star level. You can say, well, I'll just get my head down, do the last 9 years, and walk out with quite a nice pension.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do that because I thought there's more to life than just turning the handle, doing jobs that I might or might not be interested in. And I could see that there were jobs that I would be very happy to do at the 1-star level, and almost certainly at the 2-star level as well. But I wasn't comfortable that I was the right man to do those jobs. Well, to do the jobs at the next level, yes. There were 3 particular jobs I had in mind that I would love to have gone and done. But if I stayed in, there was no certainty I was going to do those jobs anyway. And so the fact that 2 of those jobs had gone already, and then I found out like just before I went down to a careers interview that the 3rd job had been given to somebody else anyway, I thought there is no way I'm going to get any of those jobs in the next year or 2 because they've all just been filled. Yeah. So that sort of pushed me in the direction of thinking it's time to go and do something else. And I'd had a great time. I'd run a squadron, I'd run the station, I'd done some fantastic flying. I thought, time to go.
Interesting. But I do agree with you. You had done some of the best jobs in the Air Force at that point. Now, your job with Cobham sounds interesting. Flying target profiles for the Navy and the RAF, which involved exciting flying when compared with most civilian jobs. But you chose in the end to go to Flight Precision Limited, which calibrated airfield navigation and approach aids. On the surface, that seems an odd choice for someone with your flying background.
Now, I can correct you if I may, Nick. I actually did both jobs together.
Oh,
because
okay.
what happened was I was recruited in as a Falcon captain, flying on the RAF support contract, which was very interesting flying. 18 months or so, 21 months into my time there, I finished up taking over running the operation up at Teesside. So when I took over running the operation, I didn't only take over the Falcon operation, but I also had responsibility for Flight Precision, who were a lodger on my unit, on the airfield there. So they were part of Cobham as well. So I had responsibility for them, but I was asked by my director of flying to get involved with their flying operation because he was based down at Bournemouth. He wanted me to be involved in their flying operation so I could report back to him on what was going on their flight ops side, because he was their director of flight operations. So he wanted me, in effect, in loco parentis, keeping an eye on their operation.
Yeah, because he couldn't do it from where he was, I guess. 200
odd miles away. So I finished up getting checked out as a captain on the flight calibration contract, and I flew with them for the majority of my time thereafter up at Teesside, and it was only the last couple of years I stopped flying for them. So I was flying both the Falcon and the King Air at the same time, and I was also managing the Teesside operations. So I had responsibility for the hangar, hiring and firing, and everything else that went with it. So it was a broad, all-encompassing job with some very interesting flying in 2 completely different areas on 2 completely different aircraft as well.
Interesting, yeah. It seems that some of your ideas to develop the operations under your responsibility met a little resistance. What might appear to be sensible and logical to you wasn't always met with approval. Looking back, have you analysed your approach? Was it correct, or perhaps could more have been achieved through negotiation?
Yeah, I do think back to it, Nick, because it's a source of some frustration to me that in some ways it became a bit of a bone of contention for the operation up there. And I find that very sad. We did work reasonably hard up at Teesside, and I did make the point in my book that my crews up at Teesside were working quite noticeably more than the Bournemouth crews. Having said that, the flying that we did up at Teesside was very enjoyable flying. We did some very good detachments to some interesting places. And so generally, I don't think there was any great resentment about the fact that we were working harder up at Teesside, because the guys, say boys, we had girls as well, everybody enjoyed the flying that they did up there. I think the contention arose because when the contract was set up initially, the work rate was relatively low. So it was not unusual for people to only work 3 days a week. And even when I joined the operation, I would think I would probably work 3.5 days a week. In fact, most of the time I was living down at Stamford in Lincolnshire for various reasons. And so it was not unusual for me to get home on Thursday night or to travel back sometime on Friday after flying and probably not drive up again until Monday morning or even Tuesday morning. So it was actually a nice relaxed work style. And I think as the years went on, our work rate increased, which was fine because that was what the contract asked for. We generally had the right number of crews, and it just meant that people had to work harder. And I think the people who'd been in there at the start of the contract suddenly found that they're being asked to work more, and they weren't particularly happy about that. And the other issue is that we didn't run a standby system. We relied on good faith. And so people, I felt, tended to abuse that, because if we finished up with somebody not able to come into work because they're unwell, the ops people would phone up and say, could you possibly come in because so-and-so is not well? And they'd say, well, no, I've planned to do something else today, so no, I'm not coming in. And so then you finish up in the difficult situation where you can't meet your contractual obligations because crews just say they're not coming into work. So it all came down to, and I would say that myself and the other managers would often pick up those ones. I come into the office some days and they say, Chris, you know, so-and-so can't come in this morning because they've got a cold. And I say, it's all right, I'll go and do it. So I'd pick up the flight like that. So it was all done on a goodwill basis, and I think that goodwill sort of evaporated. Could we have done more by negotiation? Probably. Perhaps I was a little bit naive and being a bit hard-nosed about it, a little bit more operationally focused, and just expecting people to toe the line and get on with it. So yes, I'm not without blame, I think, in the fact that there was a little bit of difficulty. Having said that, over the time I was there, we met all our contractual obligations, and we also, most importantly, produced a very good output, I think, for the front line.
One thing that struck me while we've been talking, Chris, is you've never been shy to do the jobs that were unpopular and required a bit of extra work to step in and fulfill a flying commitment.
Yeah.
Discover the pioneers of speed and adventure at one of the UK's most iconic museums. Whether it's a tour of the legendary Concorde, a walk around the Brooklands aircraft factory, or maybe a behind-the-scenes look at the McLaren automotive cars, the Brooklands Museum has it all. Based at Weybridge in Surrey, it's the perfect day out for all the family. We can also host your private function or meeting in one of our amazing event suites. With so much to see and do, come and take a look at Great Britain's history of speed and flight. Find out more by going to www.brooklandsmuseum.com or give us a call on 01932 857 381. That's 01932 857 381.
Well, wasn't that a fascinating episode from Chris and Nick again? I just love listening to these.
Loving this series, Nev, really am.
Fellas chatting away. Yeah. It's the penultimate one, and episode 6 is next week. 9 Lives is the book. This is a signed copy by Chris, and we're going to be giving it away as part of a competition later in the year. It'll also be available on YouTube as a complete download or streaming or playlist rather for the whole series. Also, last week we've got another one lined up. So this next one is Nat's Boys. It's written by Rick Peacock Edwards and Tom Eales, and Nick, of course, used to fly with Rick back in the day. So we went down to the West London Aero Club at White Waltham in Berkshire near Maidenhead, and we did the interview down there. It's a quick snippet of what you've got to come.
Had to stay current on quite a few types. At least one was operational, so I went back to the Tornado again. So I had a great tour there, basically sort of floating around the Air Force. I had responsibility for the whole Air Force, flew everything.
His last sentence there, I had responsibility for the whole of the Air Force and I flew everything. I mean, that just sort of sums up.
So it rather sets it up nicely, doesn't it, for the interview? So
and Rick's quite a modest fellow with it, but
right.
honestly, I had a long chat with him yesterday, and he very kindly bought Nick and I lunch as well, which was even better. So the other thing that happened down at White Waltham yesterday is we bumped into a couple of BA pilots who are just going to their A320 sim, I think, today. So Jonathan and Chris, hope that went well for you. And also bumped into a good chum of mine, an industry chum, as I like to say, Chris Fulton from Future Software. He's been involved with British Airways on their portable simulator as well. So one of these days, I'm going to try and persuade Chris to let me take the cameras down to his place, and we'll do a bit of a session with him on what he's been doing there, if the airline will allow us to do that. That would be
sounds
quite
wonderful.
Nice,
Can't wait.
Yeah. But no, looking forward to that very much. So, so we must crack on, and that can only mean one thing: it's time for the military.
Matt, low fuel light is on. We're down to 0. Hit the button.
Blast up bogies 135, 50, Angel 16, heading 340. Okay. 100 bogies.
Now that was timing. For those of you who can't, are you all right there, Armando?
He's fine. Everything's awesome. Don't mind me.
Do you want to leave it in, or should we do that again?
No, it's fine. Let's do it.
Okay, all right. There you go. Then knock yourself out.
Speaking of hitting the button, we always love a good pull the ejection handle story, especially when the pilot's safe. But just this week, down the street, because I'm in Colorado, down at Hill Air Force Base in Utah, F-35 crashed, and officials said that the pilot ejected and was actually recovered by emergency crews. This was Wednesday around 6:15 in the afternoon. Pilot was taken to a medical center for observation. This gentleman, Brock Thurgood, who owns property in South Weber near the base, said that the pilot landed near his property after ejection. And Thurgood said that he heard a loud boom and saw smoke. So he got into his all-terrain vehicle to investigate, along with his daughter, 2 other nearby residents. According to his statement, he said that we went up there as we were driving down Canal Road, looking for a way to get up there. They looked over and they saw him. He was waving his arms, yelling, and walking down the street towards us. And it was the pilot. The gentleman said that there's really not much more to say other than he's okay, and that's the most important part. He said that the pilot was in fairly good shape when they rolled up on him. His hands were a little bit bloodied and he was a little bit banged up, but he was walking and he was coherent. They continued on to say that didn't know how I'd be after I was in the plane crash, but he was surprisingly tough. He just seemed like a really good person, even having just been through something that was probably pretty crazy to him. So I thought about doing that in a Western accent, but my wife tells me that I do terrible accents, so probably would have just offended all kinds of people. This gentleman, Thurgood, said that they sat with the pilot until the first responders arrived. Then they actually helped the first responders navigate the terrain to reach the pilot. All things considered, he was impressed that the pilot managed to avoid hitting any of the houses in the area, which was actually a suburban area. One of the spokespersons from the base, Colonel Craig Anderley, said that he did know the pilot made his best effort to avoid any buildings, anything on the ground just prior to ejection, and that resulted with no injuries to anyone on the ground. The jet actually crashed at the north end of the runway, according to a tweet from the 388th Fighter Wing, which operates out of Hill Air Force Base. In a later tweet, officials asked civilians to avoid that area where the crash occurred. A different witness said that they heard a noise, looked up, saw the plane with smoke pouring out of it. And every time we have one of these incidents or mishaps, these witness accounts are very, very important. But he said that he saw the aircraft just before it went down. He said there were parts flying everywhere, parts of the wings, the cockpit, then just fire. But he was also glad to hear that the pilot was okay, as are we here. So There you go. Ejection seats still work, and another F-35 goes down. So we'll see what happened with this one.
Have you got an extended warranty on these things? Because you've been putting them off aircraft carriers, crashing them left, right, and centre. Do you not like them?
The U.S. defense budget is like, it's the world. It'd be like the third largest economy. They're expendable. Pilots aren't.
No, I'm glad the pilots are safe, but the hardware, that's expendable.
Yeah.
Yes. You may notice that Jonathan Warner is playing his usual game, by the way, of identifying the aircraft from the story that Armando has started, and then set me the challenge to try and get it on air before he finishes talking.
If you're listening to the audio version, you should go check out the YouTube version. But that picture that Matt was just putting up there from Jonathan Warner, that's an amazing picture when the airplane is literally beating the moisture out of the air. Just so cool with those kinds of shots.
I'm trying to sort of describe how like perhaps you might have seen, let's say, your parents doing like sort of like smoke rings. Like if they had a cigarette on the go and they'd done like smoke. It looks like essentially that it's increasing in size, isn't it? And the aircraft is flowing through that smoke ring.
Yeah, there was a different one. I think it was an F-22 from the Edwards Air Show where that Dark Star was just displayed. Somebody else got a really, really amazing picture of the clouds forming, airplane going subsonic. Anyway, let's blast through this because we have our first military actual list in a long time. So, Matt, you've got the next story about F-16s.
Oh, have I? Right. Okay. Sorry, I was too busy adding photographs. Bear with.
Thank you, Jonathan Warner. That's what we call chaff and flare right there.
Oh,
making sure that Matt doesn't know where he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's no change there. I don't think anybody ever noticed, would they? It's BulgarianMilitary.com is that. I'll put my camera on as well, shall I? Shall I go nuts? It's BulgarianMilitary.com is the website, and the headline is Bulgaria is looking for F-16s to rent for the coming years. Bulgaria is looking for fighter jets for hire to take over combat duty in the coming years. The reason, the MiG-29s can no longer be repaired because of the situation in Ukraine and because of the fighters' long exceeded lifespan. F-16 fighters are the preferred option. A similar position was experienced by the Chief of the General Staff in the Bulgarian Army, Admiral Emil Emov. During a radio interview with the Bulgarian National Radio on... Oh, it's jumped around again. What is wrong with my... It's all going so well. Bulgarian National Radio on November the 16th. According to Admiral Eftimov, I'm so sorry if I said that wrong, it is best for Bulgaria to look for fighter jets for rent for the next 3 years, and if possible they should be Lockheed Martin F-16s. There are two reasons for such a request. Bulgaria is expecting the first delivery of 8 F-16 fighter jets from the USA, which should arrive in the period 24 to 26. The second reason is that they are already trained by Bulgarian pilots to fly the F-16. The BulgarianMilitary.com recalls that a few days ago, Bulgaria sent an inquiry to the USA for the order of a second set of F-16 fighter jets. Admiral Eftimov announced that Sofia has already sent letters of request to partner countries for the lease of excess F-16 fighter jets from their air forces. The Bulgarian senior officer announced that at the moment there is no response from any partner country, but he did not want to say which countries have received such a letter. Bulgaria currently operates mainly two types of combat aircraft, the MiG-29 fighters 12 units and the Su-25 attack aircraft, that's 13 units. This particular website also recalls that according to Spanish sources, Bulgaria provided through third party its Su-25s to Ukraine, delivered in parts. Now, one of the reasons why this story is making me smile is does an air force have aircraft just lying around not being used? I mean, it's just sort of like, You know, I know some budgets are not an, you know, for some aircraft some budgets are not an issue, but you know, the idea that there might be several F-16s just lying around not doing anything seems a bit bizarre to me.
Well, I think this is similar to... Go ahead, Andy.
I was going to say it's worth asking around to see if there are any.
I suppose, yeah.
Well, it's like the Boeing Airbus thing. You know, if you can rent somebody else's airplane cheaper or get them at you know, a cut rate because they're not being flown.
Yeah, true.
Then you can save a lot of money that way. But this is, you know, another snub at Russia because they're, you know, picking F-16s over their MiG-29s, and this is now the third or fourth Air Force that has this year, since the beginning of the conflict, decided to go with Western aircraft instead of Russian-made aircraft. So, and this was on the heels of Bulgaria providing those Su-25s to Ukraine, which they do fly, even if they just use them for parts for, you know, during the conflict. I'm sure there was some, you know, behind the scenes deals being done about, if you do this, then we'll facilitate you guys getting F-16s.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's just. Sorry, it's still making me laugh. I mean, they're such expensive units. I mean, planes aren't cheap. You know, it's just the idea that there's, you know, a handful just lying around doing that all amuses me.
Well, as Neil points out in the chat room, if you bring up some Google Earth imagery of the boneyard there at Davis Monthan, you could probably see 100 F-16s sitting on the ground.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Anyway, this next story, I really wanted to get to, and I would love to get your guys' take on this. So, Andy, you've got this one.
Yeah, so this is from aviation24.be. This is former United Kingdom military pilots provide training to the People's Liberation Army of China. So China hired 30 former UK military pilots to provide training to the People's Liberated Army of China. The armed forces will be trained and taught how to fight Western fighter jets and helicopters, British government officials have revealed. In this way, China wants to gain a strategic advantage over the West in the event of war. Since the end of 2019 and the start of the pandemic, China has been making increasing efforts to bring former Western pilots on board. Not only former pilots, but also serving pilots and other specialists from the Royal Air Force, the Royal Navy, and the British Army are eligible, as well as military personnel from other Western countries. The Chinese interest appears to be great for pilots with years of experience flying British and other NATO combat aircraft, including the Typhoon, Tornado, and the Harrier. China is said to have lured 30 mainly ex-fighter pilots, but also some helicopter pilots, with annual salaries of more than 275,000 euros. The Chinese military is said to have tried to recruit former pilots with experience with the F-35 fighters, but so far these efforts have proved unsuccessful. The situation is so serious that the British Ministry of Defence raised the alarm on Tuesday to warn on-duty and former military personnel about such practices. When former UK military pilots provide training to the People's Liberation Army of China, it clearly erodes the UK's defence advantage. We are taking immediate steps to deter and penalise this activity. Defence intelligence are engaged with the individuals already involved to ensure they are fully aware of the risk of prosecution under the Official Secret Act. The government's National Security Bill will capture a range of relevant activity and provide additional possible routes to prosecution. We are conducting a review of the use of confidential agreements across defence with the aim of providing additional contractual levers to prevent individuals breaching security. There we go.
Wow.
Well, I'm sure there's a fine line. It's not illegal, and I'm sure there is a fine line between sharing your experience and sharing actual classified tactics, techniques, and procedures. I guess if you're, everybody has their prices. Somebody said in the chat room.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, the Official Secrets Act does not end for you when you've left the Air Force.
Does not.
That is a lifelong
Commitment, yeah.
commitment to secrecy, isn't it? Yeah.
I would be interested to see what these pilots are actually going to share. You know, because that you can only go so far before you start getting into confidential information or classified information.
I mean, genuinely, this is a genuine question, because I remember this was before you left the UK, and you and I had gone out for a bite to eat, and I was asking you lots and lots of questions, and I was very sort of, well, not in, you know, I was sort of asking questions, if you like, that you were sort of being very tactful about answering, if you see what I mean. So, and what I took from that, obviously, was just like, you know, absolutely, you know, there are still things, as much as you'd love to be able to sort of share it with people, obviously there are things that you just, you know, there are things that you know of that you will never be able to share, you know, with the wider public or even us. Do you know what I mean? You know, one of those things. I mean, so how does a story like this sort of make you feel?
Well, I'll address the first part. I think for any of us, whether, you know, Nick or any of our interviewees, but it's almost the same if you know, like the professional pilots that we have on the show are very much aware that there's a line you can't cross when you bring your employer into it. But we are very well versed in where that line is. I think guys like me and Nick, you know, and some of the other podcast community, prior military folks, we have taken an extra step to think about how we're going to portray our experiences, our training, but we wouldn't embark on this if we weren't clear as to where that line is.
Right. Yeah.
This particular story, and as Micah said in the chat room, this is not a news story. This happens in every conflict. Everybody is always trying to be lured. Your enemy is always trying to lure you to share even the smallest amounts of information, because each nugget of information amalgamated equals a good amount of information. So if each one of these 30 pilots gives them a nugget, they can probably put together a pretty good picture. And they know exactly what they're doing. So
interestingly, Chris says you just get used to saying, I can't talk about that.
You know, and that's a pretty abrupt end to the conversation. Usually we work up to that full stop of a conversation. You know, you'll dance around it and you'll kind of say, well, you know, it's probably not best. And you hear politicians do it. You hear public briefings by military officials. They'll step right up to the line until whoever it is asking the questions doesn't get the hint. And then at that point, you can just say, look, we're not going to talk about this anymore. Next question.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be a difficult thing to do if you were in China, away from everybody else? They've just paid you this big chunk of money, and they keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing.
Absolutely. I think it's difficult from day one, from the moment you accept that offer, because they're going to expect more and more and more. And now you're on their territory. Yeah. Right. So now you're in China. You've just signed up for a contract or an agreement. And one, you have to get back home. Two, they're going to, you can almost be assured that they're going to expect more than they initially told you they were going to expect. And they're going to put their best people on it to extract that information. So they're not.
Nev is probably the only person I can have this conversation who probably remembers a program called Yes Minister, and there's one of these very, very famous sketches that's where you've got the two civil servants sat in the Houses of Parliament having dinner, saying to one, you know, and how is the conversation about the Freedom of Information Act going, and Sir Humphrey saying, I'm afraid I can't talk about that. You know, it's that same sort of like sort of thing, isn't it? It's that sort of thing. It's I think it's a very strange decision from perhaps people who should know better. Perhaps that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah. They may have been specifically targeted for these offers, though.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, this is why your data protection, your personal data protection is important, because they may know something that you don't announce publicly, that you need the money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The MOD are worried enough about it to make it public.
True.
Yeah.
True. True.
Well, speaking of money, how do you guys want to do this list? We're going to talk about affordable warbirds. So this is not taking into account P-51s and Spitfires, which go anywhere from $1 million to $5 million. Pick your currency. So we can go from fancy and expensive to attainable, or start cheap and go to everybody's dreams. What do you guys figure? We're going to cap it at $200,000 US.
Wow. Okay.
I've got to be honest. I've looked through some of these, and I think I know what one of them is.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. That's where we're going to do it.
Go on then. Right.
You want to go cheap to expensive?
Yeah, let's do it that way. Yeah.
All right. So here we go. So this is we don't even have music for military lists. The music is classified, like we're talking about. So this whole list is warbirds that you can actually own for under $200,000. Now the first four I'm going to wrap up into one. Thank you. So warbirds under $50,000 US. What is that about? Oh yeah, 50,000 pounds. Sorry.
Yes, utterly worthless.
Yeah.
Alpha.
So basically, anybody can buy one of these. The first four are essentially versions of the Piper Cub. This is the Taylorcraft L2 Grasshopper, the Aranca L3 Grasshopper, the Piper L4 Grasshopper, and the Stinson L5 Sentinel. All of these are different versions of the Piper J3 Cub. They were used as liaison aircraft. They were used as forward air control aircraft in World War II. Altogether, there were about close to 10,000 of these made. So there's plenty of them out there. So there you go.
So we'll get change for £50,000 for those then, yeah?
Yeah, you can go out and buy one today. In fact, we probably have enough in the PTUK coffers.
Right, okay.
I'll buy one of them.
Right, okay. Very good.
Well, one that is over there is the Auster AOP-9, a single-engine reciprocating monoplane observation aircraft used by Britain's Royal Air Force, similar in size and mission to the J3 Cub or the Grasshopper. But this aircraft was operated by the Hong Kong Air Force, the Indian Air Force, the Indian Army. About 200 of them were built, so you're going to have to work a little bit harder to find one. But that's your list below 50,000. All right.
Yeah.
So next, below $100,000. The first one is the Ryan PT-22 Recruit. Look it up. We didn't have pictures because most of you are listening to the audio version anyways. The PT-22 was a military aircraft, trainer aircraft used by the Army Air Corps. Low wing, single wing, primary pilot training. About 1,000 of these made. Pretty classic looking. They had like the silver and the yellow wings. The PT-19, the Fairchild PT-19, is an iconic aircraft. I think I remember having a model, like a little plastic model of one of these. 8,000 of those were made. The Tiger Moth, the de Havilland Tiger Moth. Many of your pilots learned to fly in a Tiger Moth. 10,000 of these were built, used all over the world, and those are also under $100,000 US. The quintessential Chipmunk. I know Captain Nick would probably love to buy a Chipmunk.
A few of my friends own Chipmunks, and they are clearly lying to their wives. If this is above the 50 grand margin but below 100, but anyway.
Well, the only reason I was able to justify the purchase of our aircraft, our Cub, was because Megan was involved in the deal. Otherwise, I probably would have had to do the same and tell her, "Oh no, it's just like..."
Yeah.
Here was a couple interesting ones. The Yak 52, a single-engine radial engine, primary trainer aircraft used by the Soviet Air Force, actually up to the 80s. The Yak 52, it was a really great airplane. And here there are a bunch of them here in the U.S. that are used in aerobatics and airship. And
we featured Mike Wildman, of course, with his interview with Nick, who was flying the Yak 52 some time ago. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, very popular aircraft.
Can I ask a question on behalf of Bill in the chat room here? And I want to know the question of this. Can in any of the 50,000 and the 100,000, can one get one's hand on one with a Merlin powered engine in it?
No, for 50,000, you could probably get a disused, non-functional Merlin engine.
Poo.
Yeah, they're not
Just ask
Merlin engines.
ask the fine folks over at Duxford how much they pay for their main.
Okay, don't want to know. Yep.
Let's see. The last one in the 100,000 mark is the Nanchang CJ6, or commonly known as a CJ6. It's similar to the Air Force's T6, or the same as the Yak 52, just a Chinese version of this. But those are actually pretty popular here in the U.S. too, for up right around the 100,000 mark. Now, under $200,000. And this one, I'm going to buy one of these for Megan at one point. Number one on this list. You guys guess which one it is without looking at the show notes? She just flew one this last month, this summer. So Boeing Stearman. The Boeing Stearman, all of its different versions, the N2S, the Model 75, whatever you want to call it. You can actually get one of these for anywhere between $100,000 to $200,000 for a Stearman. It's considered like an entry-level warbird.
Wow.
So, yeah, hardest one to fly, but entry-level warbird. The next one on the list is actually the Booker BU-131 Youngman, and so you can get an authentic one for $200,000, or there's actually a company in the Czech Republic, I believe, that makes a experimental light sport version of the Booker Youngman. Looks exactly like it, except it has a modern engine, and I believe you can get that for like under $100,000. Really cool looking airplane. Next one on the list, very popular aerobatic airplane, T-34, the Beechcraft T-34 Mentor, which is essentially a Beechcraft Bonanza with the pilot sitting, front and back. Very popular, very rugged airplane that will last you forever, actually. And it's, a beach bonanza. The T6 Texan, we talked about this one at Reno. It's got its own class out there at Reno Air Races. Another very difficult, if you look at Flight Chops, I think Flight Chops on YouTube, he flew a T6 or a Harvard, I think they call them up there in Canada. Really nice airplane, right at the 200,000 mark, but now you're talking, that's just to purchase the airplane, because I think they're burning something like 60 gallons an hour is their fuel burn. And the last one that was on this under 200,000 was actually one of my favorite aircraft. It's not there in the show notes, but it was the Beechcraft Beech 18, which was used as a transport. And now you're getting into twin radial engines, very classic airplane. If you remember the movie 1941 with John Belushi, I think they flew one in this, amongst other movies. So there you go. That's your list of, if you have a spare $200,000 and you want to buy a warbird and go wear a flight suit and go to all the air shows and get paid for it, these are some of the airplanes that you can buy.
It's an amazing thing. Andy's just sent me a picture, actually, which I'm desperately trying to get up here. That is, we were mentioning the Merlin engine just a moment ago, and this picture that Andy has sent me. Hopefully, it's going to come up. Just give me two very. Sorry, this is rubbish on the audio version. But here we go. There we go. So this is a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine attached to a dragster.
And it made a lot of noise.
I can imagine. Oh, how beautiful would that be? Was it fast, or is it one of those sort of...
They didn't even race. It was at the NEC Autosport show. They turned it on, and I think I've lost a few years hearing.
Very good, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. Yes, sorry, Armando, do carry on.
No, that was it. That was the end of the list. But the guys in the chat room are all saying, Neil flew in a Tiger Moth, probably there at Duxford. Bicester, Micah says you better know how to do crosswinds if you fly a Stearman. That is a very true statement. I purposely sought out a Stearman checkout because people told me it was the hardest airplane to land in winds prior to flying that DC-3. And then there's a lot of love for the Beech 18 too, which I think Jonathan Warner has like my favorite picture ever that he's taken was of a Beech 18 at one of these air shows.
Oh, really?
There was that one with a real dark background and beautiful lighting.
Is that what he sent? Oh no, I wondered if that was what he sent me. That was all. He did send me a picture, but there we go. Anyway, I'm afraid, guys, we are pretty much out of time. Oh, this one he says. Oh right, yeah. Let me do. I ain't going to be able to load it up in time, but because we really do need to wrap up. But that one is the one he's talking to about. As I say, with the sort of like almost the night sky with the lights and the propellers and all that kind of thing. Very beautiful.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I think
Shall we save the caption competition then for next week?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. Yeah,
Yes.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
We just talk too much.
We do, clearly.
Yes.
Can I, before we wrap up, though, can I just very quickly mention military mugs? Now, Armando, you have now received one of these. We sent you one this week, obviously, as the military expert, to make sure that they were to the standard that you were hoping.
Yeah, I received it. I put it through its paces. The prototype did just fine. I shot it. I drank whiskey out of it. I drank some hot coffee, put it in the dishwasher. Pretty much all the tests that you have to, put any military piece of it. And it came out just fine, unscathed, actually.
Very good, very good. So a couple of people have expressed interest. They'll be on the website very, very soon. But if you would like to reserve yourself one of these military mugs, then do get in touch via email. It's podcast@planetalkinguk.com, expressing your interest. And then as soon as we've got an idea of how many people want the initial batch, then we can get some ordered, and then we can give you some prices and stuff like that. So if you would like to get your hands on one of our military mugs, please send us an email to podcast@planetalkinguk.com. While I'm doing that, I'll just whiz through all the socials very, very quickly. WhatsApp number here to get a message into the show. It is +44 757 2249166. That's +44 757 2249166. Social media links. All you need to do is search your favourite social media platform for Plane Talking UK. That's Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. It's Plane Talking UK. I mentioned it earlier. The email address, it is podcast@planetalkinguk.com. podcast@planetalkinguk.com. You can also send in your request for the military mugs. Please do send us in some feedback as well. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll include it in next week's show or as soon as we get it. And where the mugs will eventually be available for you to purchase, along with many other things, planetalkinguk.com, www.planetalkinguk.com. On there we have links to the various platforms on how to listen to the show, also how you can contribute towards the show to help pay for the running costs via Patreon and other such services, including Amazon. So just by doing your normal Amazon shopping, you can use our link and you can actually help pay for the way that the show is put together. That's it for the social links. Nev?
Yeah, so just like to thank Andy very much indeed for coming on. Really enjoyed your contributions as always. What are you up to next week then, Andy?
Oh, pleasure as always to be here. Like I said, very little. I'm off to Cyprus on Wednesday. Once I have finished doing what I'm doing in Gatwick, I'm just sitting on the jump seat and expanding my horizons with new courses and stuff at work. Then I'm off on holiday. But no, it's been great being on again. It's been lovely to see you all. I'm quite surprised. I forgot to mention, is this a contractually agreed you two have to be on the show, Nev, Armando? Is this one of your...
Oh, that's true, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah. Special negotiations have to take place, obviously.
Yeah. I'd forgotten that. Yeah. Armando, what are you up to next week?
Well, the rest of this weekend, Megan and I are gonna go hang out at the U.S. Air Force Academy here in Colorado Springs. Gonna do some hiking, go to a football game, and then everybody's favorite. Next week, I'm back in Recurrent, so 2 days of ground, 3 days in the sim.
Oh, nice. Well, I'm off to Helsinki on Monday for work on an A350-900 with the Finnair, boys and girls. One of my favourite aircraft, actually, the A350, nice and quiet. And it's a good aircraft on that kind of route, actually. So I'm looking forward to that.
I bet.
Very much indeed. So, guys and girls, that's it. Thank you very much indeed for a fantastic show. And thank you to everybody in the chat room for all of your contributions as well. We'll run the caption competition next week. And it's quite a fun one as well. So thanks very much indeed to everybody. And bye for now.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah.